Continue to trickle in. Oh, thanks, John. I always forget to do that anyway, but I'm glad you are. So welcome, everybody. I'm Julie Roth. I'm the Energy Manager for the Office of Sustainability and Innovations at the City of Ann Arbor. And you are at the Ann Arbor Solar Stories with the GLREA. I'm just going to share my screen and a couple of welcome slides, maybe. Can you see that okay? Yeah, it looks like slides. Excellent. So go. Yes. Okay. Here's where you are. You are at GLREA's Ann Arbor Solar Stories. Today we're going to hear from Sarah Mills. I am treasurer, maybe not president, but treasurer of the Sarah Mills fan club. Sarah is from news to Sarah. Sarah is from the University of Michigan. She's going to be talking to us about solar siting and a new center at the University of Michigan and all kinds of really interesting stuff that I can't wait to hear about. This series is financially sponsored by EGLE, which is the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, by Homeland Solar, McNaught McKay Electric Company, Harvest Solar, and Synergy. And so we thank all of those folks for allowing us to put on these educational workshops. These are the Zoom programs at the GLREA. First, they're of every Thursday, pretty much. You can come on the first Thursday of every month to Ann Arbor Solar Stories, which is this. The second Thursday of each month is Clean Energy Seminars, hosted by Mark Clevey. I think still hosted by Mark Clevey. Is that true? And these are meetings about all kinds of clean energy topics. On the third is Detroit Solar Stories, and then the fourth could be a solar story from anywhere in Michigan or an energy sort of Q&A. So if you sign up for these on the, oh, looks like someone's mic is on. You could all mute yourselves. That would be helpful. You can sign up for these on the GLREA website. The GLREA, if you are new to this meeting, is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's formed in 1991 and is supported by its members to educate and advocate for renewable energy in the Great Lakes regions. And this is part of that mission, which is the education part. So, little pitch, you can help GLREA by becoming a member or renewing your membership if you're already a member, or financially sponsoring a membership for a local teacher or student you think might be interested in clean energy. Encourage others to become members and encourage others to come to these Zoom meetings and learn more about renewable energy in our region. So that's my little introduction and pitch, and I'm glad you all are here. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sarah and let her take it from here.
Thank you very much, Julie. And I'll pull up my slides and rearrange things. I told Julie and the people who were on earlier, I've only have 22, 23 slides, but I'll run through them and then have plenty of time for questions. So I talk energy all the time. And I talk about Ann Arbor energy an awful lot too, because I'm on the planning commission for the city of Ann Arbor. But this is the first time that I had to pull a slide deck together about the Center for Empowering Communities, because it is relatively new. So I'm going to test drive it with you. You can tell me what you think. All right. So, and I already scrolled over that. So just as kind of overall approach or mission statement for the center, I think of it as integrating leading edge social science research with technology design, community engagement, and policy making to foster decarbonization solutions that advance community goals. And so we're not all things energy. It's the Center for Empowering, but that's like play on words there, communities. And I really see communities as the thread behind all of the things that we're doing. So what I thought I would do tonight is talk to you about, first give you an overview of our Michigan activities, then give you some snippets from Michigan relevant research projects or work that we're doing, and then just a slide about kind of how we're connecting the dots across U of M's campus. So the center is new, but the activities are really things that we've been doing for a number of years. And in particular, I would say kind of the focal point of our center, what kind of started us off, is this partnership that we've had with the State Energy Office, now in Eagle, since 2019. And it's a pretty broad-ranging project, to the mission of which is to help local communities as they set policies related to clean energy. So we started out pretty simple with the survey, and but now getting into kind of our 2024 work plan, it's effectively, we do all of the above, plus retooling for PA 233 and year-round fellowship. So I'm going to walk through kind of what are some of the key buckets of activity that we do through Eagle. And what you'll see is that we try to serve communities across the urban-rural spectrum, even though most of the second half of what I talk about is really going to be kind of focused on large renewable projects in rural places. So we started out our activities really by asking local officials how they felt their activities, like what was relevant to their local government. So this is in partnership with Close Up. Effectively, Eagle bought out the Michigan Public Policy Survey. And I think I saw Deborah Horner come in. This is like, I know so many familiar faces, which is great. So Deborah manages this survey, and the board schools had this survey for the last 12, 15 years, I can't remember. But it goes out to every city, county, township, village in Michigan. The top elected and top appointed official gets it. They hear back from lots of people. So on this 2019 survey, they heard back from 1,350 jurisdictions, 73% of local governments in the state of Michigan. And that information was both fed back to local officials through two kind of public facing reports, but also there's a really long white paper that we developed out of this with recommendations to Eagle effectively about how they can meet communities in Michigan with where they are. So what are the things that is important to communities in the UP? What resources do they have? What resources do they say they need? And all the way down to Detroit and its suburbs, kind of what are the needs of local governments there. So I would say our entire approach kind of to the activities that we've subsequently done with Eagle is based on like what local officials tell us they need. And so the CEM is the Community Energy Management Program. If you are a local official, you should know that Eagle gives out grants to local governments to do all range of energy things. So this survey has helped kind of inform some of that, but also Catalyst Communities programming. And you'll see in just a minute what I mean by that. Eagle reran the survey this past fall. So fall of 2023, and to allow us to effectively understand what's changed in the 4 years, what resources do communities say they need now, and to kind of take on some new topics. And I think the first results should be out I wouldn't say any day, but any week now. So that data will start pouring out of here. But I would say that our activities are really based on data. And we're hoping that they're making a difference. One of the activities that has come out of this, and you'll see this a lot, like focus in our activities of the center, are focusing on zoning. So in 2019, we did the first pass of zoning in the state. So first of all, figuring out across the state's 1,856 local units of government, who is responsible for land use decisions, because it's not always clear. Sometimes it can be the township, sometimes it's the county, sometimes it's unzoned. And so sometimes there's joint zoning jurisdiction. So in order to affect change, you have to know who to communicate to. So figuring out who's responsible is important. But also, once we figured out who was responsible, we collected the zoning ordinance text and searched it to see whether or not they had rules on the books for wind or solar of both kind of distributed generation scale and utility scale. We did another full scale pass in 2021 and found that like more jurisdictions were zoning for solar, which was good and expected because it was on the rise. It was a new land use. And for what it's worth, silence in a zoning ordinance isn't means anything goes. Silence typically means it's not allowed. That's how Michigan zoning is set up. But even now, we still have a quarter of the jurisdictions in the state are silent entirely on all scales of renewables. There's no mention of energy effectively in their zoning ordinance. We're continually updating this now, not funded through the state anymore, but I'll talk about this a little bit later. The Department of Energy's Solar Energy Technologies Office allowed us to take what we started in Michigan and actually expand it to 6 other states. So we're able to keep it updated there. Another bucket of activities that we've done through Eagle is create an online repository of guidance for planning and zoning. So my MO is like, don't recreate the wheel, but there's also a lot of stuff out on the internet. And so we need to curate. And of all of the things that you could read about planning or zoning for wind and solar, what are the 4 or 5 that are the must reads? And that's what we effectively pulled together here. We created case studies of, in particular, the kind of solar on brownfields or disturbed sites in Michigan. They're written by experts, not just University of Michigan. We are egalitarian. There's number that are authored by MSU folks, and also students. One of the things that's in this vein of creating a repository is when there's something that's not available, we have been able to try to fill it. So you'll see in a minute, our solar guidebook is a clear one, but just in terms of what's planned for going forward, we have a draft of a zoning guide for energy storage. So the first half explains what energy storage is, and then the second half is kind of a fill in the blank zoning ordinance. That's been on pause while we try to figure out how to make the guidance compatible with PA 233. And that's another thing that's now on our work plan this year, is to kind of adapt the existing guidance that we have, this solar guidebook, as well as MSU's wind guide for in light of PA 233. I mentioned this, so now in my slides, I don't know that I need to reorganize it just a little bit. After curating things, when we find holes, we try to fill them. And so one of the big holes back in 2021 was guidance on zoning for solar. And so as a collaboration between MSU Extension and U of M, we have this zoning book that's also a nice hard copy. The first half is what you need to know about solar of all scales. The second half is a fill in the blank zoning ordinance. But I use this to demonstrate how we've not just created the tool, but we've tried to do what I call scaffolded training associated with it. So after it came out, we sent one to all of the jurisdictions in the state along advertising our training series. So in May of 2022, this was, MSU did a series of trainings specifically to the guidebook all across the state. In June, we worked with the Michigan Association of Planning to do a webinar for attorneys and planners about what they should know about solar. We also then, if you did either of these, if you participated in either of these trainings, you were eligible to go on a wind and solar bus tour so that you could walk in a solar farm and a wind farm, so you can see what it's like. And then once you had been there, we did what we called deep dives, or I called them bring your own zoning ordinance, where we talked for 2 hours about the pros and cons of different setback distances. And you have to only be a zoning nerd to love that, but there were some stalwarts who liked that. And in fact, wanted to see that happen in their region of the state. So in early 2023, we did a training series with NEMCOG. So that's the Northeast Michigan Council of Governments, where we had, I don't know, over 70 different local government officials show up for this series of training. We did a bus tour that kind of left out of Grayling for them. We did training in the Battle Creek, or we did a similar series in Battle Creek area over the summer, and then did a specific thing with Ingham and Eaton counties. 2024, we're still sorting out like what our bus tours are going to look like, kind of what the programming is, but this idea of kind of series of activities that build on each other and talk to each other is one of the things that we've been trying to build. That links then to another activity that kind of spun out of the center. In 2022, there was as part of this Eagle project, we had a U of M group of graduate students from the School for Environment and Sustainability do their 18-month capstone project with Eagle, trying to effectively increase proactive zoning. So we had all of these tools that were developed, but the question was like, why were communities not taking them? And that's what this team of students was trying to figure out. So they did interviews with local governments, and then they piloted this program in 2 different townships, one in the UP and one on the Indiana border. And effectively what they came out with was a series of, introducing solar to the community. It started honestly with mailing everybody in the jurisdiction a postcard saying, we want to talk about renewables. Like, what do you not know? These were places that didn't have proposals, to be real clear. This was trying to get ahead of energy development. So we want to have a community conversation about renewables. Tell us what your questions are. So that was kind of the first session. And then after that, it was, well, what are our community goals and where do renewables fit with those community goals? As a way to kind of inform their zoning. So right now, 3 of those students are, I guess, technically sort of my bosses at Eagle. Eagle hired them to make this program like further pilot it. And so we continued to kind of consult with them. It needed it needs some retooling in light of PA 233. And also one of the things that this project team turned up is that having a bonus pot of money to a community that to like want to be renewable ready would be real helpful. And that was actually something that came in the budget that was approved over the summer. And so in light of those incentive payments for communities that host large wind and solar farms, they're working right now on that. Oh, there's a typo here. This is our step. So this program through Eagle, all of the things that I just talked about, bus tours and the idea of like developing templates, is something that now Department of Energy proper is really trying to see in other states as well. And so they have this funding opportunity called our step, and we're hoping that we get funding for it. But among the things that we would really aspire to do next is have a calculator for communities so that they can understand sort of the developer's business model, so that they can know what they can negotiate for on kind of economic community benefit sides, but also it'd be really helpful for communities to know like what that extra row of trees around a solar farm costs, right? Or what's the cost implication? Why is it that, what's the cost implication of a 50-foot setback versus a 100-foot setback? So that's one of the things that we're hoping for. And also a Clean Energy Information Bureau, getting more experts across the state, maybe who don't think of themselves as energy people. They're the bird experts or the soil toxicity experts who can then say, better put in light of science, kind of what are the impacts of wind turbines on birds or solar panels on, soil health. We have, through our center, have also offered technical assistance. So spent many nights in townships across the state, answering questions of planning commissions and local officials. I'll say that our policy is that we only do it at the request of the local government. And really our goal is to help communities understand the pros and cons and fact from fiction. Also, we've reviewed draft zoning ordinances to tell them what their ordinance is conveying, what message it's sending. We have effectively we've really tried to utilize the network of where people go for information. So once upon a time, there was this very wonky magazine called Michigan Planning and Zoning News. It's not going anymore, but that was the thing that planners would read. And so effectively we had a special issue of that was on wind and solar, and we mailed it to everybody in the state, all of the local officials. We give presentations at the annual meetings of the Planning Association, the Townships Association, the Michigan Municipal League. So that's most of the like planning and zoning centric stuff. For a minute, though, I'm going to tell you about special things. And actually, this was something that Julie was involved in very early on, which is another part of our center's activity is helping to support Catalyst communities. So this is a program through Eagle that as you can read here, it's a multi-tiered approach to providing communities with the resources and actions local governments can take towards a just transition to decarbonization in a whole bunch of different areas. It provides online resources, webinars, workshops, accelerators. It's rather than recreate a wheel, what we're trying to do is create a network of like ways that different organizations feed into each other. So there's Eagle, who has this Catalyst Communities program. It links to the Michigan Green Communities program, which has been around for a while. It's a collaboration between a number of agencies within state government and the Townships Association, the Association of Counties, the Michigan Municipal League. And so effectively, all of the categories that are in the Michigan Green Communities Challenge are the same way that the resources that Eagle has available through Catalyst Communities, how they organize the resources. So if there's a challenge item, if you want to be a gold Michigan Green Community Gold member, then, and if you want to know how to take action on any of the items, then you can effectively find it on the Catalyst Communities Resource Hub. So there's templates, and this is where I got to know Julie, because she had done the toolkit for Solarize that we effectively advertised through this. And so that's one link, but the other link, and this is specific to how my center comes in, is that we organize the Catalyst Leadership Circle and Fellowship. So I think that I'm going to actually explain it more on the next slide. This idea arose actually in Ann Arbor City Hall in February of 2022. We effectively pulled together some of the leading communities in the state who wanted to divide and conquer. They were all doing similar things. And so rather than everyone developing a Solarize program, can one community develop it and share it with another? That was the kind of genesis of it. Now what the Catalyst Leadership Circle is in order to get in, you need to take that Michigan Green Communities Challenge. And so silver and gold members are eligible to be part of this network. And it every 2 months, the kind of sustainability staff in these communities, and some of them don't have staff, so it's the volunteers, meet together to do some dividing and conquering, but also have a two-way dialogue with the state. So they often get kind of a sneak peek at the things that Eagle is planning to do or provide feedback on. Also, being part of the Catalyst Leadership Circle means that you're eligible for having a summer graduate fellow work with you. It's a program open to graduate students across the state of Michigan, working directly with a host community. So it could be a Grand Rapids or a Traverse City or an Ann Arbor. doing something that allows that community to take the next step in their sustainability journey, but also making a template that another community can use. So it's trying to like build the resource toolkit, demystify it for other communities along the way. And in terms of the next steps of this coming school year, we are working with an undergrad program starting at U of M, but the intention is to move this to other universities as well, where undergrad students would effectively do an audit. That's not the right word, but like help communities that aren't part of the Michigan Green Communities program figure out how many of the actions they've already taken so that they're able to springboard into that program. So hopefully there'll be exciting stuff to talk about next year for that. One more Michigan specific thing, but I want to say that this is not necessarily with my Eagle grantee hat on, but because I'm a planner, one of the big things that I've been focused on is trying to figure out for local governments, communicate to them how PA 233 works. And so earlier in January, I guess it's February now. So in January, a couple weeks ago, we did a webinar with MSU and Michigan Association of Planning. I have these FAQs out, and I tell you can see, I can drop the link later on in the chat or people can write it down. I consider it a living document. This is my best understanding now. And when people tell me I'm wrong, I'm editing it. But this is, I've tried to triangulate about how we think PA 233 works. We're giving presentations at Michigan Townships Association, the Association of Counties, the Municipal League about how this works. And there's also something in MML's magazine. So just to try to understand, help local governments understand what how they need to change their zoning ordinances, especially for the largest projects to, what their options are there. This focus on kind of the largest renewables project is the other half of, or the other side, the non-Michigan specific side of the work of our center. So I'll just talk about a couple of projects. One is rural solar in the Great Lakes. So it's a 3-year project that is funded by Department of Energy. It includes Michigan State, Iowa State, and Loyola Chicago. I talked about this before because we have this 6-state zoning database. Not counting the 500 zoning ordinances for cities and villages in Michigan, this project allowed us to add in 2,800 zoning ordinances across this region. We know for like 95% of the entire region who's responsible for zoning, and we have their zoning ordinance in hand. If in their zoning ordinance they address utility scale solar, then we have had a team of grad students read all of those zoning ordinances, coding for the setbacks, whether or not the solar is allowed in the ag district, lot coverage, spacing requirements. So lots of detail. It also, in the state of Michigan, has allowed us to see how many of those ordinances are compatible with PA 233. So like there's been a synergy here recently. Another part of the project is a really granular understanding of property taxes. The property taxes that solar developers pay are the biggest, especially for large projects. Like that's the biggest community benefit often to that host community, but it varies greatly. Not in the state of Michigan, kind of what those taxes are vary from place to place because it's based on our local tax rates. But across this region, some of them have a flat tax. And so we're trying to communicate what that is and kind of which units of government benefit from those taxes. And then my portion of this also includes doing interviews with solar leaseholders for large solar farms across the Midwest to effectively understand what they're doing with the lease revenue that they receive from solar. The first thing is when there's not tons of, at least as there's not tons of people who host solar on their property. The entire pool of potential people to interview as of projects that were online by the end of 2022, there was 102 across these 6 states that like were hosting an active solar project. So, but also we're hearing all kinds of stories about this, like solar as farm diversification, solar as, you know, their retirement income. So the publications of that will be coming out in the next couple of months. Another big research activity is a different 3-year project, also with the Solar Energy Technologies Office in Department of Energy. MSU's on this one too, but the primary entity in this is Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. What we're trying to understand is how communities who host utility scale solar, how neighbors feel about these projects. And we're specifically looking at solar that's done on brownfields or previously disturbed sites, green fields, and then agrivoltaics, so mixing agriculture and solar at the same time. We had 7 case studies across the country that the paper just came out 2 weeks ago, and yesterday we hosted a webinar on it. University of Michigan's portion, we're responsible for this nationwide survey of solar farm neighbors. You can see the cover of that survey. I got it on my desk here too. The data on that will come out in the next month or two. And then right now we're in the process of creating a guidebook for how communities can have visioning sessions. Again, this is the title of this is community-centered solar development. So we want to encourage communities to think like, how and where they see solar fitting in their community ahead of time. In that guidebook creation, we're working, MSU is one of the, MSU Extension is one of the entities that's piloting it, but we're actually working with land grant extension groups across the country, so in 6 different states. And some of this is linked to another project that my center's worked on, which is thinking about extension's role in renewables convening. So the genesis of this is that extension is a trusted voice in many communities, and how can you empower them to be able to lead conversations about renewables? So one of the things we pulled together a workshop here in Ann Arbor in like 2 falls ago. So this would have been 2022. The punchline is extension across many states was doing bits and pieces of this, but really they were most interested in thinking about leading communities in planning for rural prosperity, not necessarily planning for renewables. It's more like renewables' place in the context of rural prosperity. Also, they needed a network. They needed a toolkit, which is one of the things that we're trying to develop. They needed training and they needed funding. And so we've been using the report that came out of this to advocate for funding for them in the Farm Bill. And there's a new funding opportunity from Department of Energy that's responsive to kind of this work. Another kind of spin-off of this is convening a Michigan-specific workshop about what does it mean to kind of plan for rural prosperity, to have trusted entities leading proactive planning processes that are really focused on community values and goals, and how rural development options, including energy, impacts them. And like, what is a supportive policy context? What does a better project look like? And so we got some funding from the Heising Simons Foundation and partnered with the Office of Rural Prosperity, which was in Michigan's Department of Ag and Rural Development and is now in Labor and Economic Opportunity, to kind of map out who in Michigan is doing this and bring folks together this past November to think about, is this the right vision, and what would it take to make this a reality? We've also here in the center convene folks across the country to find paradigm shifting solutions to effectively figure out how we can speed up renewables deployment, but do it in a fair way, not upset communities. And so this report just came out a couple of weeks ago, where we really did a deeper dive into 4 opportunities. One is focused on an innovative policy framework about like, what would a fair share look like? Another is creating new local structures or task forces in communities to evaluate renewables projects, thinking about different ownership models. The idea that like people don't maybe not necessarily want to own it, but they want the attributes that come along with ownership, say over it, and understanding that they are getting a fair share, and also thinking about aspirational planning. I think I have two more slides. In some, like what I try to do, what our center tries to do is make the research accessible. So in the past year or so, I've given presentations that end with like, or that include in the middle, like, here's some of the knowns about why we see people respond one way or the other to renewables. So I talked, if you were at the My Healthy Climate Conference, you probably saw this, or I've given this to the Nature Conservancy, the Renewable Energy and Wildlife Institute. This is the State Legislative Leadership Forum. But I think what's really important, like what we try to do in our center, is take it to the next level. Like, this is what science tells us, what can be done. So like, what are the practical solutions to it? We've been trying to convene those kind of conversations across campus here too. So getting engineers and business folks and the policy school, our social scientists, natural scientists, talking about energy justice. What would collaborative approaches to, how would we work together on building codes? Or we're very excited, we want to have an agrivoltaic test bed on our campus farm, decarbonizing buildings, hydrogen, advanced nuclear. And this spring, we're going to be talking about siting because that's the hot topic right now. So we're doing a lot, but I also like to manage expectations. We are a center of 2.5. And so we feel like we punch a little bit above our weight class, but it's possible because we have a steady stream of really amazing students. And so that is what I have. And I know I talked fast and I covered a lot of things, and I welcome any thoughts or feedback. And I'm going to share my screen, or I'm stop sharing so that I can see you better.
Thank you, Sarah. Does anyone else here think that Sarah is a total slacker? And she clearly needs more ideas for projects.
Right? I got my notebook out, right, so I can take them.
I'm kidding. Okay. I'm gonna let you manage the QA. Just go ahead. Go ahead.
Dave.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a very nice presentation. My question is it possible to find out how our local area jurisdiction may have responded to the questionnaire in your first slide?
No, that data, it is all anonymized. This is how we get good, well, historically, this is how you like get true responses, so that you can't find out how any single jurisdiction responds. Because we get such high response rate, oftentimes questions are available aggregated at the county level, which is pretty amazing. And online, I can find it for the 2019 survey, and presumably the 2023 survey will have this out too. The data are all broken down by region of the state, population size, kind of urban ruralness.
Region of the states probably would be good enough. I'm
yeah,
not
so
trying to
six regions of the state. Yeah.
Not
yeah,
trying
and
to
I can I'll find some links, or maybe yeah.
Not trying to put anyone's feet to the fire yet. But it would be interesting to know, because my local town has a moratorium on community solar. They do not want it at any cost ever. And if they're changing their mind on that, would be interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. John.
This may be an impossible question for you to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. You know, because you've done so much work on identifying solar ordinances and zoning. I'm sure there's a continuum out there. You know, we always hear about the restrictive ordinances and zoning. But you know, do you have any sense for our majority of the zoning ordinances restrictive, or yeah, just as a guess, is it 50-50, 40-60, any idea? I know that's, like I said, it's an impossible question, maybe.
What, so the reason that it's an impossible question is because it's difficult for I've asked, like, what is doable to one developer may not be doable to another developer. So like what the line is really hard. What we have done, and I've recently pulled this together, is kind of compared what is in the zoning ordinances to the state law. And I'll tell you that like there are practically 0 wind ordinances that comply, often because they have a height limit. And sometimes that height limit is not necessarily restricted, but the state law says like the height limit pegged to pegged to kind of FAA's requirements rather than a specific number. So there's that. There's also like I have kind of a line of like what I think is like doable. Historically, like even in the wind ordinances, like there might be 0 that are compatible, but in terms of setback distances or height, ones that don't have height limitations, I would say there's at least 100 in windy places that are probably doable, but that's, or workable, like that's the term that I'm using. For solar, I would say it's for large scale solar. I think that there's a number of workable ordinances. I think it would be probably closer to 50-50, but I already said this once, but I'm going to say it again. Silence in a zoning ordinance is restrictiveness. And so one of the reasons that policies needed to change is that developers would show up to a community not knowing what the rules were and start, like, they made investments because they needed to make investments, right? Like they started doing leasing because effectively there's market demand for renewables. But if the local government hadn't had a conversation about the land use, like it was kind of a crapshoot of what way the local government would go. And I mean, I wrote an op-ed about this, like the old system was broken. So it wasn't, it like effectively communities need a deadline to like figure out. I think that would go a long way. Also, communities, this is not just Michigan, this is in a lot of places. And this is why, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm a planner, right? I'm, but the research finds this, but like being proactive, I'll just say that that's my bias. But when a community is in reactive mode, like it's the knee-jerk reaction to say no. And so when I'll suggest that Gratiot County is nationally celebrated and like the American Association of Planning's like wind guide as being proactive in thinking and effectively saying wind makes sense for us. We're going to like make it very clear and easy for developers to do business here and attract wind development. We do have some indication that projects in communities where the zoning came before the project, before a developer showed up, that it may still have been a tense community conversation, but ultimately those communities were less likely, where they were proactive, they were less likely to deny a permit or change their zoning to block it. So that was a very long answer to the thing, which is like, it's really hard to tell. Lee.
Yeah, Sarah, we've seen each other in Blissfield quite often.
Indeed.
And the input that I feel is happening, you know, Monroe County, I think 14 out of the 16 townships have very restrictive ordinances. And when you're sitting next to the Monroe power plant and you have all those distribution wires, you know, running through your township, it's pretty hard for you to be convinced that if you're the one township that has the softest ordinance or the most friendly ordinance, you're going to end up with all 3,800 megawatts in your township.
Yeah.
So the question is whether the Public Service Commission has the attitude that it's their responsibility to spread these things out through the state.
We'll see, right? So within PA 233, one of the things that the commission is to consider is the amount of energy technology already in that community. So one of the questions that I have is if, I mean, the places that you're talking about in Monroe County right now are zero, like they have zero, right? And so, but one project would be huge. And so how are they only thinking about like what is on the ground or what also is being proposed? I don't know how that will be interpreted. And I also don't know like what that means, like what they're going to consider, like that it's not laid out in the law. So I think that that's honestly one of the things that that will be important to sort out. And that's why how the law is implemented matters. I mean, this is no surprise. Like this, I'll just say, like, I am concerned about concentration, like of energy infrastructure. I'll say again, my PhD is in farmland preservation. So that's another bias that I wear. I don't dispute the numbers in terms of the amount of farmland overall that are taken, but it's not evenly spread. And that, I think, Lee, to your point, like that's the concern, right? Of some townships, like, is it all going to be here?
And you know that Lenawee County is next to Monroe County.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have 7 grid-tied farms of various sizes in our county. You know, we have small ones, we have middle 20 megawatts, and we have 100 megawatt. That's not operating yet, but so if anybody wants to see what it looks like in a community, right?
Yep.
We have a variety, and we have one that I think is especially useful for agrivoltaics. It's built a little different, and so if you need someone to see locations, we have them. Thank you.
Well, and it's nice, like for the next bus tour, send me an email, like we can.
Okay.
Great. John.
I guess I have 2 comments. The first one is kind of dovetailing what Lee was saying. I think it's interesting that Lee brought up Monroe, because Monroe obviously is where DTE has nuclear power plant as well as one of the largest coal plants left in the country. So they have a lot of electrical infrastructure in Monroe. And at the same time, they pay an inordinate amount of property taxes to the city of Monroe because of this equipment. But as these coal plants shut down, and ultimately when the nuclear power plant shuts down, all that property tax revenue is going to disappear for the city of Monroe. And they may wake up one day and think, oh my God, what is going on? And they maybe haven't connected the dots that they need to substitute large business property taxes for what they're going to lose within the next 10 years or so. And I think you obviously know that one of the benefits of these solar projects is an increase in property taxes, which means that if businesses are paying for it, then the local citizens won't see their taxes go up as much because someone else is kind of picking up the freight, so to speak. And so I just think that's an interesting dynamic that's out there.
Yeah. We think a lot about, about coal mine jobs, but I grew up in Monroe County. And so like it's when, with that coal plant and the power plant, the tax revenues that they're paying, it's, sure, the jobs within the power plant, but it's also city jobs, right? Like, and I think one of the things that's tricky though, is that I had a group of students, not in a previous project, work with resources for the future to try to understand how much taxes are being paid in fossil fuel dependent communities, and how you can replace that revenue, like the extent to which you could replace the revenue with renewables. The investment per acre makes it tricky. So in the city of Monroe County overall, like, not a problem, right? Like, but the city of Monroe, like, it's going to be tough to use that same footprint as the coal burner and within city limits to replace that revenue just through renewables. Energy storage, much more investment per acre. And so, like, there's an opportunity there. But I mean, honestly, we need to be thinking, you know, a lot of these communities that will see large, you know, centralized power plants close are starting to have need to be having those conversations. Because, and in terms of investment per acre, like, renewables just often can't achieve that same, just like you can't get the same amount of megawatts on the footprint of a coal plant, like, getting that then scales kind of to the investment. So what it means that I think is tricky is that, or it depends on how you look at it. It means it's an opportunity for those townships, right? For rural places. So the city or whatever entity has benefited from, you know, the property taxes that have been paid by a coal or a natural gas plant. They can replace some of it, but maybe not the whole thing with renewables. But instead, renewables are seeking rural landscapes. And so this is where it's providing a new economic opportunity. And that's, I mean, honestly, that's what I've been talking about since I did my dissertation. Like, where is this an opportunity? Like, and thinking about how this fits in your long-term plans for economic growth. But now I led to another question, or you want to correct, which is cool.
No. I just want to follow up with two quick comments. One is that there's a lot of industrial land that's not going to be able to be used for new purposes that could become the site for solar projects. I mean, Flint's got a ton of it where the old General Motors factories used to be. And I'm sure there's probably some in Monroe as well, but you're probably right. The other thing I just think you probably have already thought about, and if you haven't thought about it, then I would suggest you do think about it, is Public Act 232. I'm not sure how the governor is going to set up this new office of Community and Worker Economic Transition Act, but it seems to me that a lot of what you're talking about in terms of proactive economic development at the township or county level is exactly what this new office ought to be to help communities transition from fossil fuel dependence to more renewable energy development. So you might be able to bring that act into your work as well.
Yeah, and that's what I know about, but like I don't know how that one will be implemented either. So
I don't think they know either.
flag.
Frankly, it's too soon. So,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Lee's got another question.
Well,
Maybe but Ted has his hand up too. So Lee, you could go quick, and then Ted gets to go.
I'll be quick. Yeah. You said something about taxes, and the impression I got from what you said was that Michigan doesn't have a flat tax, but we do have a flat tax. That's all.
Well, we can have a flat tax on solar. If the developer opts into it and the local government opts into it, which is, again, from my perspective, local government beneficial. One of the things that I think will prove to be interesting is how that meshes with PA 233, because I think in order to opt in, if projects go through the state level, now they're going to have a local government enact kind of a renewable energy or a solar energy taxing zone. So yeah, that was a change that happened. We don't have it for wind, and I think that's problematic. I'll be real honest. Ted, and then John. Oh, you're muted though.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it legal for a municipality to own its own utility?
My understand, I mean, We have municipal utilities. I'll be honest that the like utility regulation side is, I know enough to be dangerous. So municipal utilities are public utilities. So like Lansing Board of Water and Light, that we have in the 40s. Don't somebody I'm sure on this knows, like 46 maybe, municipal utilities. Many of them are
42.
Thank you. Okay.
42.
There's a bunch of them. The real issue though is how hard it is to become a new one, right? But that's a whole different conversation. I'm wondering if you have any additional comments about the issue related to storage zoning and siting, because that's kind of we talk a lot about solar and wind. We don't really have an existing ordinance in Michigan related to storage, right? And you have a possibility, right, that you could actually have storage facilities in urban areas, suburban areas, anywhere where you really can't put a wind farm or a solar farm, but you could put a fairly big storage facility. And I could see how some people will go, oh my God, those lithium ion batteries blow up all the time. They're going to put it next to my neighborhood.
Yeah. So this is, I think a lot of the focus is like, well, the PA 233, like, does it apply? I mean, it does apply, to be clear. It does apply in cities and villages, but like, how common would it be to get wind or solar, which is not super common. Maybe you'll have a small portion, but you can put 50 megawatts of storage, which would fall under PA 233 on just a couple acres of land. So it's very, very possible in urban areas. Trying to put fire safety in perspective, I think, is really important. The state of New York right now has like done a thorough review of its policies around energy storage after like a series of safety incidents last summer. And so the guidebook that we had, that literally it was out for review in November. So we're trying to figure the storage guidebook. We're trying to figure out like how it works again in light of 233. Borrowed heavily from how New York has been regulating storage. So I think at this point for storage, we have to look to other states. This actually brings up an important point. Like right now, I would say that there are less than a handful of zoning ordinances out of all 1,350 zoning jurisdictions in Michigan. I don't know that there's more than 5 that include energy storage. But part of the package of bills, don't quote me on which is the number, Senate Bill 271, I think, included, which is the big bill that did the renewable portfolio standard and the clean energy standard, has specific targets for, requirements for storage. So we're going to see it. And it could be all across the urban rural spectrum. So right now, what we've been doing until the guide comes out is point people to what's done in other places. But again, for the largest things, either you've got to figure out something that's workable, an ordinance that a storage developer would find workable. You need to adapt your ordinance to be a compatible renewable energy ordinance. That's something laid out in the law, or effectively you just let the state handle it. But there's been other questions. Like this is one of the things that's being raised in New York about the fire code, like making sure that our fire code references the newest standards that accommodate that account for energy storage. So also I'll just say, in case there are other tax nerds out there, I don't think that the last I checked, the state tax commission does not have guidance on how utility scale energy storage is to be taxed. And so there's a number of policies that need to be in place.
That's amazing. It's 7:59. That was a phenomenal, like, natural, no more hands raised. Sarah just finished her comment. So I think in the effort to always keep these right on time so that our speakers and all of our participants can know that they're here for 1 hour and not 3, because we could probably talk to Sarah for 3 hours, but I'm not sure any of us really want to be here for 3 hours. Anyway, huge appreciation to you, Sarah, for all of the amazing work that you're doing. It's really gratifying to see as I'm working on my, intense little urban-ish city to know what's going on at Eagle in the rest of our state. And just really appreciate the work that you're doing and also taking the time to be here with us tonight. So thank you. You're
Thank you.
much appreciated.
Take care.